And away we go. Alright. Now, before getting into the episode, it is worth noting, as I am recording this, tomorrow will be this podcast's 4th birthday. Yay! And it's also my birthday, but that's another story altogether. And yeah, it's been a wild ride with this podcast. Starting with the guests, then slowly building into episodes where I have the lads on, but then up until now, those lads don't come on all that often. And then when me and the lads just run out of things to talk about, whether it be on social media, I look at what goes on these apps called Ground News and Straight Tower News. They're not sponsoring me, by the way, I just like using them. And it's helped me inform myself, and it's really helped me be informed of what goes on in the world. And I'm continuing to use those apps ever since, even with the lads coming on every now and then, more frequently every time. But then slowly, up until now, I'm not gonna put pressure. I'm not gonna be too concerned if they don't come on. I don't blame them for not coming on to these episodes, especially since the last few times they were on, there have been problems on their ends, and even though they do try the best they can, problems still happen anyway. And of course, there were episodes that a particular platform in question does cut me out. However, I have found ways to continue with the episode regardless. So, I mean, who knows? And especially until this project that me, Eric, and Shadowmine are working on does get off the ground and eventually makes it to the public sphere, we'll just have to wait and see what happens for not just 2026, but the rest of this decade of the 2020s. So, although I am more leaning towards starting to make social media content again since, well, spring of last year as of this recording. Wow, it's been a while since I've done that. But anyway, that's just me, and life goes on. So, of course, I'm now going to get into the news. So, as I am recording this, a very, very well-known story has made it into the sphere. You know, the elephant in the room has to be addressed. So I will do that. I will address the elephant in the room. I just gotta find that particular story so that everyone knows exactly what goes on. Trump's Venezuela oil plan faces $100 billion cost decade timeline. On Saturday, Donald Trump announced the United States would temporarily run Venezuela and allow U.S. oil companies to operate after U.S. Special Forces seized Nicolas Maduro. Behind closed doors, oil became central to the Trump administration's discussions, with advisors and Stephen Miller considering Venezuela's energy as early as last spring. Venezuela sits on about 17% of global oil reserves, yet produces only about 1 million barrels a day. And analysts warn reviving output will take years and tens of billions of dollars. Residents of Caracas face uncertainty as Trump claims it won't cost us anything after officials said Maduro was being taken to New York. Markets reacted. U.S. oil briefly topped $60, then retreated to $57 a barrel, while Chevron, U.S. energy company, issued cautious statements and removed U.S. government references. I knew this was going to happen. It's always going to be about the oil, and the U.S. are going to strike big. They're going to be making a lot of bank. The US is going to be making a lot of bank out of this. It's going to be a lot of money, that's for sure. Anyway, back to Nicolas Maduro. Of course, ever since he was captured by the US and its military forces, which are relevant for this particular context, a lot of Venezuelans, whether within in the nation or outside of it, wherever the country they've migrated to since Maduro being quote unquote president. So they are thrilled that Maduro has been captured and taken to the US and ready to be taken to trial for what he has done since he was first elected as the leader of Venezuela, which it is still ongoing. However, since he's not actively president in Venezuela, the vice president, Delcy Rodriguez, will take over as interim until the next Venezuelan presidential election takes place. And whilst I do have other thoughts that this may be a win for Venezuelan people, that they are pleased that Maduro is not in power anymore, and there is going to be a change next time a election comes about. The future for Venezuela is uncertain, especially since the US is currently executing and delegating a transition for the country from what Maduro had in place when he was there into whatever the US plans for Venezuela after they finish their transition. Even with that being done, and even after the US does whatever they have to do, or what they want to do, it's not over for the cartel. Look, again, I will allow Venezuelans to have their moments. If they're happy, I'll let them be happy. Well, I'm all for celebration and allowing people to enjoy life. The the many ups as there are downs. What's gonna happen after? What if we go back to square one? What if there's a loop and there's like a particular hidden hierarchy of particular leaders that will take over for Maduro's agenda until, well, whatever happens with Maduro. But what if he doesn't come back? And what reports are saying that if he is to go to get the death penalty, which I've heard reports about, I have said about people losing their lives. Whilst I have concerns about Maduro as Venezuelan president, I don't believe the death penalty on Maduro is the answer. I know Venezuelans, I know a lot of Venezuelans do not like Maduro. However, I put my foot down about putting the death penalty on anyone, let alone Maduro. I think life imprisonment, in my opinion, would be a better punishment. I wouldn't say caning, but if that's on the table between that or death penalty, I would take caning. I would not advise caning. I would just say life imprisonment. End of. So yeah. And whatever happens to Maduro, it's not over for the hierarchy of the Venezuelan cartel. Another puppet will take over. Someone else is going to take his place. And I'm not talking about Delcy Rodriguez. I'm not sure if I was saying her first name right. But right now, Rodriguez is the interim president who has taken over Venezuela when Maduro is on trial. But whilst Rodriguez is going to continue with Maduro's plans for Venezuela, when the next presidential election comes up for Venezuela, Rodriguez isn't going to have much time left. A candidate from the party of Matador is going to win, and he or she will be the next president of Venezuela that's going to be elected by the people, and without having to hear arguments about whether the election result has been rigged. Even if a leader has been elected democratically by the people of the country, who's to say that this newly elected leader isn't as much of a puppet as the last leader, who has clenched onto power for so many years, even when many people argued about election results. That's just my perspective. And a lot of cases, I am open to hear counter arguments about this. Everyone's entitled to their opinions on the situation, as is. Personally, for this case alone, I think I will say people, if there are people that are defending Maduro or saying that Maduro shouldn't be put on trial, he should go back to Venezuela and continue leading his people, I would say to them, if you like Maduro so much and what he is doing, why not you go live a year or two in Venezuela, and then once your time is up, come back to me and give your feedback on what Venezuela's like under Maduro. Again, I'm not going to argue with people having different opinions from me, and I'm certainly not going to take away Venezuela's moments of celebrating, which shows that they do not like their current leader. I'm not going to argue with that. It is one thing to have knowledge on any given subject. However, having the experience of said knowledge is a completely different terrain altogether. You learn so much more by experiencing something as opposed to just having knowledge of it. This applies to anything, whether it be in finances, the local economies, the art scene, urban planning, discussing different ideologies, speaking foreign languages, the infrastructure of today's social media platforms, and there's so much more. Those are just from the top of my head. And also, today's technology is also applicable in terms of experiencing as opposed to just having knowledge of that particular subject. If there's anyone that would argue that Maduro shouldn't be arrested and should go back to Venezuela to continue leading his people, live a year or two in Venezuela. I'm not going to get in the way of your opinions. You're entitled to your opinions, even if so many people disagree with you. Live in another country for at least a year under the leadership of a particular person. If you disagree so much with what people are saying about that leader, and then after a year, or maybe 2 years, come back and then give your thoughts on what it's like living in that country under that leadership. That's how you get the opinions of majority of people from that country. And again, everyone's going to have disagreements. No one's going to agree with them. And that's okay to have disagreements. However, unless you experience what people are expressing, no one is going to fully understand what goes on in this world. And I'll be honest, I don't know much about the world myself. And if I had to experience whatever opinions I have, I'll say, okay, if this works, fair enough. I'll say I can see how that could be beneficial. Or if I have an opinion about something that I believe to be beneficial to me, but turns out it's very detrimental to me, I was like, oh, that's not good. I now understand why it's a bad thing. If I experience something and understand the impacts and consequences, my opinions will change instantly. And never again I will argue about it. That's just my perspective and opinion. So anyway, back to the story about the transition plan from the United States in Venezuela. But let's see how it goes. Although I do argue that they have lots of oil. Venezuela has lots of oil. But again, uh, there's so much potential with oil that if there is negotiations and if countries agree to mutual agreements, particular countries in question will benefit from that such negotiations and deals. However, yeah, I'm not going to say that this is a first come first serve, you snooze you lose kind of situation. Well, whatever happens happens, and if you don't like what's going on, you have disagreements with what's going on, or disagreements with how operations are going ahead, try spend an hour with these people, maybe a day or two, or maybe you live a year, or live an entire year in another country where a lot of the drama or beef is taking place, to get an understanding of why people having such opinions that they have about particular countries, leaders, and groups of people, etc. That's how you know what goes on in this world, and that's how you truly learn of what goes on in today's society. Ranger star Dujon Sterling was arrested and charged in connection with road traffic offences after a one-vehicle crash on West Graham Street, Glasgow, around 1:25 a.m. on Sunday, January 4th, 2026. No one was reported injured in the incident. Sterling is expected to appear at court at a later date. Oh boy. Well, I will say that, whilst this is not looking good for the Rangers player, Dujon Sterling, at least it's a 1-3-1 against their bitter rivals Celtic in the Old Firm, which is one of the UK's most fiercest, bloodiest derbies. And I say one of it. It's debatable which is the most dramatic, more intense derby in the UK. But I know the Old Firm is one of the fiercest soccer football derbies in the UK. I know that for sure. Rangers winning 3-1 in that, given how big of a club Celtic is as opposed to Rangers, fair play. That's nicely done. So anyway, back to the story about Dujon Sterling. Oh, this summary is not very descriptive. I feel there's more to this, however, they just won't let me. Yeah, I'm looking at a lot of outlets about more information on this. There isn't much. Car crash, appear at court later date. No one was injured, which is important. Glad everyone's still alive. Yeah, I'd assume this is still a developing story, so give it a few weeks, wait till the court date happens, and see what happens from there. That's all I know for now, and yeah, see what comes from that. France tightens checks on food imports amid farmers' Mercosur opposition. The French government said on Sunday it was tightening checks on several food imports in a bid to ease concerns of farmers who have been protesting at what they say is unfair competition from countries with looser regulations. French farmers have been protesting over a planned European trade deal with the South American Mercosur bloc, and other issues, including measures to contain a livestock disease. Agriculture Minister Annie Geneva said Sunday that the tighter checks would make sure food coming from outside the EU did not include substances banned in food produced in the bloc. A decree would be issued soon announcing the suspension of imports of some food products already known to contain those substances, she added. Imports, regardless of from where they come from in the world, must comply with our standards. France is setting an example in Europe by issuing this unprecedented decree that concerns more than a dozen food products, wrote Geneva on Twitter X. Melons, apples, apricots, cherries, strawberries, grapes, potatoes. They will only be on sale in France if they show no residue of those substances banned in our country. Other products from South America, such as avocados, mangoes, guavas, or certain citrus fruits from elsewhere will be allowed in if they comply with our standards, she added. Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu said earlier that any imported product showing traces of these weed and fungus killers, namely mancozeb, glufosinate, thiopanate, methanol, and carbendazim, which are banned in Europe, will not be allowed in France. The deal between the 27-member European Union and Mercosur countries Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, and Uruguay was agreed on in 19, but has stalled as it moves through approval votes in individual countries. Germany and Spain back the deal, but opponents in France say the trade arrangement would lead to cheap imports of South American commodities, notably beef, that do not meet the European Union's environmental and food safety standards. I can see why that could be a concern. So, I'm trying to see I get an understanding of this. The European Union, with the regulations, the committees that they put in place for many years, they have very high standards for what foods are to be brought in the European Union. And in fact, there's such high standards within EU countries that produce such foods in farmlands. Yet, even with such high food standards, the European Union wants to draw up a deal with Mercosur in South America on farm produce imports, which are going to be not just cheaper, but the regulations for agriculture in such countries are also much looser than it is in countries within the European Union. And whilst the same standards the European Union has will apply to those imports coming from South America, I just wonder, whilst it is understandable that countries are going to continue and will continue with drawing up trade deals and agreements for all kinds of imports, whatever that might be, why is it that the European Union, with such a robust agriculture sector across all of its member states, is drawing up a deal with South America to bring in food that was grown on their lands into the EU, which was made possible because agriculture standards in South America are much lower, meaning there's a lot more for South American farmers to grow and do within their farmlands to produce the food that goes towards other countries, not just within South America, but other countries outside of it as well, especially the EU. I'm just saying, even if the EU doesn't draw up a South American agriculture deal, I'd assume the EU can continue with its agriculture sector all right. I think something I would argue, which I'm not against having such standards put in place, how there is such thing as too high of a standard to the point that limits the options of what food that farmers can grow and sell onto the market. If there's any regulations regarding health and safety standards, fair enough. I would have done I would suggest and advocate for such regulations like that myself. But that's it. Health and safety is very important in any sector and any place of work. Anything else is anyone's game. If the only standards and regulations that are in place amongst the EU nation states are those that ensure the best health and safety for the farmers and the food that's been grown in the EU, and that is it, and that's it, I think the EU will do all right sustaining their own agriculture amongst EU member states. But with so many more regulations and standards that's put in place, I personally believe that I would argue that's what's somewhat hindering progress in the agriculture sector. And not just the agriculture sector. I think there's so much standards and regulations put in place in anything and everything in the EU. Whilst I'm not against putting have it setting high standards for producing goods and services, yet what are those standards that's put in place? Are there such standards put in place to ensure quality, health and safety of employees, the goods and services being produced? or the other regulations put in place to prevent an oversaturation of outside competition. Whilst I understand that's also important to prioritize products within your own borders, but if you have to force in regulation and standards preventing outside competition from coming in, then there's nothing for businesses to work for. There's nothing to improve on beyond where businesses are currently at right now. That's all I have to say. And whatever happens from all of this, whether it goes well, if it doesn't, one thing is for certain. Do not mess with farmers. Never. Just don't go there. Don't mess with them whatsoever. I've learned that the hard way. Actually, no, that didn't happen, thankfully. But still, if it was to happen to me, yeah, I would learn the hard way, for sure. Big Tech's fast expanding plans for data centers are running into stiff community opposition. Tech companies and developers are facing increasing community opposition when trying to build large data centers. Many municipal boards are struggling to determine if data centers fit within their zoning laws, with some considering waivers or new ordinance. A growing number of data centers proposals are being rejected as residents pressure local officials, with opponents going door to door and handing out signs. What a surprise! Tech companies are still going at it with the data centers. But of course, people in local communities are saying, no, we should not build them. It's not good for our communities. And I agree with that. It's not. What benefit? What do data centers do other than consume heavy amounts of electricity and provide more power to AI chatbots? I'd question why such chatbots need that much energy from data centers to begin with, but that's a story for another time. Whatever these local communities are doing to say for preventing tech companies from building data centers, keep going at it. Stand your ground and do not stop under any circumstance. So long as you don't stand in the middle of roads. That last few times that did not end very well. Don't stand in the middle of roads. But still stand your ground. Don't let data centers be. AI chatbots do not need that much data or electricity consumption to continue to operate. Ancient Egyptian Pharaoh's boat reassembled in real time at Grand Egyptian Museum. A boat belonging to Egyptian Pharaoh Khufu, one of two found opposite to the southern side of the Great Pyramid, was being reassembled in real time at the Grand Egyptian Museum on Tuesday. The cheddar wood boat, 42 meters long and containing 1,650 wooden pieces, is expected to take around 4 years to fully assemble. The purpose of the boats remain unclear, but experts believe they were either used to transport King Khufu's body during his funeral or for his afterlife journey with the sun god Ra. There's new discoveries made every day, or at least new discoveries made every month. And whilst there have been such artifacts from ancient Egypt found many, many years before, we're still discovering parts of our history. So let's see what happens with this boat that's 42 meters long. I actually want to see what that looks like, if there are pictures of it. I can't find any. Well, once it's complete, surely the media will do some reporting about it every now and then, or at least just do a one-off reporting of it, and say, this is the boat from ancient Egypt. It was used to transport Khufu's body after his passing during his time as leader of ancient Egypt. Something along those lines. Or something else. Until A clear reason or intention of using such historical context has been identified. Evangeline Lilly announced on Instagram that she has brain damage due to a traumatic brain injury, TBI, and possibly other factors complicating her health situation. Lilly revealed that she fainted in May, hitting her head on a boulder and requiring stitches for her injuries. She shared that tests indicated her brain is functioning at a decreased capacity and that she is now working with doctors on recovery. Despite her challenges, Lily expressed gratitude for having a calm holiday season and thanked her supporters for their care and prayers. She's had to get stitches for her brain, or at least for the wounds that she's gotten after hitting her head on the boulder. Well, what's important is she's still alive and she's still able to go on about what she goes on with her life with. And even with a reduced brain capacity, again, as long as she is still alive, that's what's important. So, good for her. Harvard research finds spending money to save time boosts couples' relationships satisfaction. Couples who spend money on time-saving services report greater relationship satisfaction, according to Harvard research. Hiring help like cleaners or dog walkers frees up time for couples to reconnect and reduce stress. While outsourcing chores can help, couples still need to put effort into quality time together, researchers say. Actually, that does make a lot of sense. If you're doing something with your significant other, like walking your dogs, cleaning the house, yeah, it does make sense that you will have some kind of bond with that person. That makes so much sense. So yeah, I mean, I'm not saying this is old information, but of course, such information like this, it does add up easily. It does make a lot of sense that that is the case. Gunmen raid village in northern Nigeria, killing over 30 people and abducting others. Police spokesperson Wasiu Abiodun said the gunmen, locally called bandits, attacked Kasuwa Daji market in Demo village at around 3 p.m. on Saturday, killing at least 30 and abducting several. The raids began on Friday in nearby Agwara and Borgu, part of escalating banditry across northwestern and central Nigeria involving mass killings and kidnappings. Arriving on motorcycles, gunmen burned stalls and looted food from Kasuwandaji market, and women and children were not spared, said Dauda Sakule, who was wounded while fleeing. Abiodun said at least 30 victims lost their lives during the attack, and some persons were also kidnapped, and residents report no security presence as corpses are recovered. The incident follows last year's mass abduction of more than 300 pupils and 12 staff from a Catholic school in Niger State, with 100 freed before Christmas, while vigilante groups fill security gaps. Firstly, I want to say, rest in peace to the 30 people who lost their lives in this village gunman raid in northern Nigeria. I send my condolences to all of their friends and family, and whatever religion they follow, whether they're Christians, Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists, another religion, also whatever ethnicity they are part of. No, no one should lose their lives like that. We shouldn't go killing people based on their identity and their upbringings. They wouldn't like it if that happened to them, so why should they do it to others? doesn't make sense, in my opinion. And it's certainly been a while since any other news outlets have even reported on such stories like this. And if there are outlets reporting on this story, it's not enough. At least there aren't a lot of big name news outlets that are reporting the story as much as other medium-sized, small-scale news outlets that are reporting on this story. Whatever happened, whatever's happening in Nigeria, it has to stop. Stop the killings, stop the violence, and please, for the love of everything that is holy, stop the racial, ethnic, and religious divisions. Eric, if he was on here, he will have so much to say on this. He would also say that this violence between people in Nigeria shouldn't have happened. It shouldn't happen right now. It has to stop. But even when there is some kind of solution to this, more problems are going to arise eventually. 1 year after California wildfires, progress is slow in rebuilding, navigating complex hurdles like permits and insurance payouts. Some California wildfire survivors have slowly started rebuilding a year later. Many survivors face high construction costs and cannot afford to rebuild, leading to anxiety about the changing character of affected communities. Chief Tyler Wells wondered about the future of his neighborhood restaurant, saying there's no neighborhood anymore after the disaster. And he may as well be right. Ever since that wildfire in California, many parts of California for that matter, many homes were lost. And it's not just the wildfires happening in California. Maui had their wildfires happened many months prior, and haven't heard much about rebuilding homes in that particular part of the US ever since. And if there is anything coming back about Maui communities in California, more likely than not, there will be reports about redevelopment plans for 15-minute cities, smart homes, security cameras on every corner, and digital payment services wherever you go and at every store. No more will you have physical cash. Just take your phone, top up with your money from your bank account, pay it on the scanner, and away you go with all your groceries, other goods and services. Now, make of that information as you will. Yeah, if there's any more information regarding wildfires in the US or anywhere in the world, most likely they will talk about how to rebuild the communities that was once burnt down. And they're not just going to implement new technological features that'll be far more advanced than whatever we have right now. There will be critics that will argue that having such technological capabilities may potentially be a burden in our way of life, especially since regarding end-to-end encryption. Now, I don't see why there shouldn't be end-to-end encryption for all technology that we have in this world. But if there's not, then who's to say there aren't going to be groups of people with the tech-savvy knowledge that they have to hack into technological infrastructure, hack into the e-gates, the payment methods, and even our appliances in our smart homes. I'm just pointing out very good points and concerns for the future. Whilst it's very overwhelming and quite ambitious to have such technological advancements coming our way. Yeah, no, not many people talk about how could individuals override technological or technological features or appliances. Is there any way for anyone to just remotely shut it down, or at least shut it down manually, in case any other technological option is not working as it should. Anyway, that's somewhat that's a somewhat related topic on another discussion for another day, whatever. So back to the story about California wildfires. Progress is slow in rebuilding. Yeah, I'm not surprised that they are rebuilding. There a lot of people who've lost their homes the moment the wildfires happen. They would want to ask about where are they going to stay until my home is rebuilt. And if they can't wait, they would people in California would want to take the initiative and efforts to rebuild their homes themselves. If it wasn't for high construction costs and permits in place wherever counties in California have such laws regarding permits, just rebuilding communities in general is quite complicated, depending on whereabouts in California you are, because, yeah, there's so many laws in that part of the US with just anything. So that's why not much is being rebuilt at the pace that people want them to be rebuilt. Permits and also high costs of construction. Yeah. I hope people in California get their homes back. They can live in their communities again as it once was before wildfires happened. And as for the people in Maui, if there are still people in Maui, I hope, they too will get their community back. Hopefully, mostly back to the way it was before a fire happened that struck out in their communities, rather than just another advanced redevelopment plan with technological payment methods and smart homes and smart appliances and such. Whilst it sounds exciting, but how is that going to solve not having a roof under your head after losing it to a massive fire? Start with the basics first, then think about the extra details, the luxuries, the technological appliances, and other wants that people want to have. And that is it for this episode.